Good morning. All right, here's a brief tutorial on the updated face mask prototype that I showed you guys yesterday. I think this one is going to be how I'm going to do it. You, of course, can modify it however you want. Again, this is not surgical medical grade. This is for the regular people that want to wear it outside to work, whatever. And later on, after this is all over, if you want to wear it while you're mowing the yard. Anyway, so first off, you're going to take the pattern, and I'll upload the pattern, and you're going to cut 2 pieces of your lining. So that's the inside that touches your face. I typically use flannel. And you're going to cut 2 pieces of your main fabric, and that's the pretty stuff that's going to show out to the world. So you cut 2 pieces of each, right sides facing together. So when you're putting your fabric down, getting ready to cut it, you want to make sure your pretty sides are together. Some flannel have pretty sides and some flannel does not. I always pick the softest side of my flannel and make it my stuff that's going to be touching my face. Then you pin it down. My scissors can easily cut through 4 layers of fabric. If you don't have really good scissors, you're probably going to struggle with it a little bit. So I recommend using the sharpest pair that you have. So again, you're going to cut 2 of the lining and 2 of the outer. I just pin everything together and cut it all at once. Makes it go so much quicker. So then you're going to do that just very quickly. Doesn't take very long at all. I know some people have a little bit of trouble with arthritis cutting, so I'm sorry. There's no way around it. I know some of the pleated masks are a little bit easier because you can just cut rectangles and you're done, but this one will not be that way, unfortunately. So one modification you can make to this pattern if you wanted to. So where my button is, I have a squared end. If you prefer the look of a round end, you would just take one end of your inside and your outside fabric and round it, and I'll show you when to do that. You don't do that yet, but I'll show you when. And also, I am going to use elastic on the chin of mine to gather the chin, but if you wanted to, you could put a couple of darts in your chin area, and I'm going to show you where to do that right now. Just let me grab a pencil real quick. So if you wanted to use darts instead of the elastic on the inside, you would cut darts here, about that big, and you would cut a smaller dart here. And so by darts, I mean when you cut this pattern out, now you're going to cut your darts. And so you're going to cut this triangle out and this triangle out right here, okay? So after you have all your pieces cut out the way that you want them, so you have your lining fabric and you have your outer fabric here, you're going to go to your machine with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're going to do these front curves only. 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's pretty important on this one to have a 1/4 inch. You don't want it bigger and you don't want it much smaller, and I'll tell you the reason. So once you get those sewed, you're going to come back and you're going to snip your seam allowances, and I already did it, I'm sorry, but so if you don't have pinking shears, so I use pinking shears because to me that's the easiest. I don't want to sit there and snip, snip, snip. But if you don't, you want to at least take some snips with very sharp scissors, just like this, just up to your seam, but not touching your seam. And you want to do that all the way around both curves. The reason for that is it's going to take a little bit of bulk out of that, and it's going to make it lay much nicer when you have a finished product in the end. If you don't, you're going to have bulky looking seams, and it will just look kind of funny. So if you were going to do the dart method, you're going to have your little triangles here. So you're going to, from the outside, your little triangles are going to be together like this. Here, I'll snip a triangle in this and show you. I don't want to use darts, so I'm not going to put it in my pattern, but we'll pretend like these are your darts that you would have cut into your material. We'll pretend like this is your front curve seam. So this is your first dart. You're going to take this dart like this on all of your pieces of fabric, and you're just going to sew it right there. And then you do that to all the remaining darts that you cut, okay? And that's going to give it more of a cup formed shape at the bottom. I'm going to use elastic to achieve that shape. So next, sorry, my mat always gets crumbs on it. You're going to take your outer fabric. So this is your pretty fabric. You're going to leave it out like that. You're going to take your lining fabric and you're going to push it the other way, just like this, and smooth out that seam on the inside a little bit. Then you're going to take your top seams and match them. I do it like this, okay? And this is where you want to have an iron. Some people don't iron. I always iron my seams, always, always, always. They always lay much better. They feel better. And in this case, you're kind of sanitizing as you go along a little bit too, so. But I just get that as flat as I can, and I do one way and one the other way. So that's facing that way, and this one is facing that way. And I use pens. Some people use clips, and some people just freehand it. Because this is such a long piece, I recommend pinning or clipping at least. And you're going to do the same thing to this bottom, right here. And again, I'm going to do that one the same way I'm doing as the top. And I just pull this a little bit to get the bottom to lay the other way. And just iron it flat. Just a minute or two. That's all it takes. Or second or two, not minute or two. I'm sorry. Just like that. And then I'm going to pin right here just to hold it in place for right now. Now, flannel will stick to other fabrics pretty good. So, you know, it's a little bit easier to work with flannel. And you're going to take these, and I like to press when I'm sewing. I've always pressed while I sewed. It, to me, makes a nicer looking product, and that way you're not sewing over wrinkles and getting a crease in your project. So that's what that part should look like so far. So because I'm using elastic on the chin, my elastic is going to be sewn in right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it down here. And as I'm sewing, I'm going to stretch my elastic so it gathers my fabric. So when I get done, it's going to bunch it all up at the bottom. Okay? I'm not going to do that yet. I just want it there so I remember to do it. You could, at this point, sew your button on to your right fabric, which is what I'm going to do because I don't like the little underside of my button where I sewed my button on to show on the fabric anywhere. So I'm going to do it now. However, if you don't want to, you can wait till the end to do this part. The other thing is you need to figure out which side you want your button on and which side you want your loop on. And you're going to pin your loop in. So I'm going to have my loop on this side. And I'm going to pin it right here. So this part is going to be the part that's on the outside when you're with your finished project. This is where you know where your loop is, so when you're sewing, you can make sure you get it. So I'm just going to pin it right there, hold it in place until I get down there to sew. And when I sew this, I'm going to back stitch that several times to make sure it's in there good and secure. So since my loop is on that side, I'm putting my button on this side. Now, depending on what kind of foot you have on your sewing machine, you may not want to do this step yet because it's going to be, you have to get pretty close to the edge of this to sew it. And so some machines, if you have a bigger foot, that won't work. Let me grab my button. I left it over here. Sorry. Okay. So I'm quickly going to sew my button on because I know it bothers me to have that showing on the back side. I don't know why, but it does. And I'm going to, if you have a foot on your machine to do this, that's fine. To me, it's longer for me to put that foot on my machine and fiddle with it to get the button sewn on than it is for me to just hand sew this on right quick. All I'm doing right now is cutting me a little piece of fabric, just a little piece of the scrap fabric, and I'm going to put it on the back side of this so when I'm sewing this button on, it has a little bit more place to bite into and keep it secure, okay? So my thread doesn't pull through my cotton fabric. All right, just gonna start it off here, and I know, boring, sitting watching somebody sew on a button, I'm sorry, but that's part of this design, so You can skip this part if you want. The other option is, if you didn't want to do this part, you could use a thicker elastic on the other end and put a little fabric tab on the end of it and attach it with Velcro. I know a lot of people want to use Velcro. I do not like Velcro. It sticks in my hair and it drives me crazy. It pulls my hair all day long. So I won't use Velcro on mine. I don't like Velcro. However, for some people, that's all they have, and that's an option, and that's okay. It's just not what I'm going to use. But I want you to adapt this however you want, however is going to make it work for you the best. This, to me, was the best I've come up with so far. I do think I'm going to try a large elastic on the other end with a fabric tab on the end of it with a buttonhole in it, or a button in it, and have a buttonhole on this side, but that will be at a later date. That will take so much more time to make, so I'm not going to do it right now. I've got a lot of these to get made, and I'm not going to have time to fiddle with those, and that will be a fiddly process for sure. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with this one. There we go. So I'm doing this about 4 or 5 times. You want to make sure it's good and sturdy. If you have embroidery floss, that might even be better. You want to make sure it's strong thread because you're going to have elastic looping around it, pulling on it. But same as if you're making the headbands right now to go with the regular mask, you want to make sure you're using plenty of thread because you don't want those to come loose. So I just do my regular old knot like I always do when I'm sewing on buttons or anything like that. If you wanted to at this point, and I didn't plug my hot glue in, or I probably would have, you could put just a little dollop of glue right there just to make sure that holds really well. Okay, so now I'm going to take it over to my machine, and I'm going to leave an opening right here because that's where I'm going to turn it. I'm going to start here. I'm going to back stitch, and I'm going to be careful with my button. I'm going to go all the way around, all up and around here, over to here. I'm going to back stitch a couple times across this one because I want to make sure that's good and secure. I'm going to come here. Oh, I should have pinned. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. So I'm starting on this side. So I'm going to start my elastic on this side. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Start my elastic on this side, okay? So I'm going to back stitch several times right where this elastic starts, like a lot of times. And then as I'm sewing, I'm going to be keeping my fabric flat, but I'm going to be stretching out my elastic. And I'm just going to keep sewing, and I'm going to keep stretching as far as I can until I get to the end, and then I'm going to back stitch again. And then I will be close to my end where I want my opening. This is to turn it, okay? So you can turn it inside out. So I'm going to go sew this. I'm not going to show you that part because I don't have a good setup for over there, but I'm going to go sew it and I'll be back. You're going to do probably an 1/8 to 1/4 inch seam allowance on this part. It's up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. I will probably do closer to an 1/8 than I will a 1/4 inch just because I already have my button on and it's going to be easier for me. And I will be back. Okay, I'm back, and here's what it looks like from the back side. Okay, so I'm going to snip my little threads that I have here. They're going to be on the inside, so you wouldn't really see them, but they bother me, so I do snip them. This is, again, where you're going to come around and clip around your curves. Okay, I don't have my pinking shears over here, but so this is the way you do it with scissors. You just take a sharp pair of scissors, and you just do it right around right to your seam, but not into your seam. Again, normally I use pinking shears, but they're over on my other table. I got my seam pretty close right there, so I'm going to want to be careful. So my button's down here. Here's my elastic, and when I sewed my elastic in, I just ran it with my seam, and I back stitched there, and there to make sure it's held in good, but it's sewn all the way. But I back stitch a few times to make sure it stays there. And then this is the other end where the other elastic is. Now I forgot to tell you, if you wanted the rounded end where the button was, instead of sewing square like this, you would have done round like that. I'm not going to do that because to me that's a little bit harder. And and I want to make this as quick as possible. And it would be harder to sew close to that button with rounded edges, I think. So then I'm just going to turn this the right way. So here is your, this should be your elastic side here somewhere. This is the hardest part on this pattern. The other patterns is a little bit easier because you have bigger spaces to work with. So I just pull that out. This side I'm going to flip over and pull out. Tedious part, sorry, but that's how you have to do it. So that's what that part looks like. Just keep working with it. It'll come. Pain, I know, I'm sorry. And then you want to poke your ends out with something not sharp, because you don't want to poke a hole in your seams. So I'm just going to use the end of my paintbrush here. That's what I have handy. It'd be better if it's just a little bit pointier, but you know, hey. This is just a tutorial, show you how to do it. Probably have sewn before, so you know tricks for this kind of stuff. I'm going to come up and around my seams to make sure they're all out really well, just like that. And then on this one, I'm going to go down here and do the same thing on this side. I'm going to go up the edges of my seams, make sure they're pressed out like that. Poke them as best as I can. Just get that as best as I can. Now with elastic, you have to be a little bit careful. You don't want to leave your iron on too long, but I am going to press this a little bit. I want it nice and flat when I'm sewing. Now you could just stitch your hole together and call this done, but it's not going to stay in place very well. So I highly recommend you do the top stitch step. I know that takes up more thread, but it just takes a few minutes and it will give a much prettier result, I guarantee you. So just iron this a little bit. Now turn this over, pull this seam out, get it as best as you can. If you've sewn, you know all the tricks. If you haven't sewn, hopefully you're learning something. I'm not a seamstress. I'm not ever going to claim to be. I only do craft project sewing. But here is this. So on the original ones, you would have ironed on here as well. But because I have that elastic sewn in there, I'm a little bit nervous to do that just yet. So I'm going to go top stitch first, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like all finished, okay? Be right back. All right, I'm back. So this is what it looks like. When you're doing your elastic, make sure you're pulling your, when you're doing your top stitch, make sure you're pulling your elastic. If you want it to have a more gathered look, you want to skip the top stitch from this point to this point, because as you pull it and stitch over and pull it and stitch over, it's going to make it straighten out a little bit. Top stitch gives it a finished look, but it also holds all of the fabric in place where it's supposed to be, okay? I just used a plastic button on this one, and I back stitched where I started and I stopped. Now on my prototype, I showed you I used a wooden button. I would not recommend that because these are meant to be thrown in the washer and the dryer, and I don't think the wooden buttons are going to hold up for that. So here's what it looks like when it's finished, and I will show you what it looks like on. All right, hopefully you can see this well enough. Here is the finished mask. As you can see, I can move around. It stays where it's supposed to. Doesn't go over my ears. I don't like things over my ears. It bothers me bad enough with the glasses. I can't wear headbands or anything. And I have a daughter who's had several surgeries and she can't have stuff on her ears either. So this is what I've come up with. It is tight fitting to the face, so if that is something that you don't like, this one probably won't work for you. Gathered down here. Now the gathers would be tighter if I had not top stitched over the elastic again. And on my prototype, I'll show you. I did the elastic on the inside of the mask without putting it on the inside, and it gathers somewhat. So you can decide which way is going to work best for what you're making it for. Very easy to remove. Stays up over the nose okay. You just unbutton it and take it off. So it doesn't have to come up over your eyes. And that's how it works. It just loops right there on the button, and that's how it stays secure. That's what the front looks like. That's what the bottom looks like. So pretty easy to make. You could potentially, where this piece of elastic is, if you don't have hair ties, which is what this is, it's just a hair tie, you could use a wide piece of elastic and put a little tab on it, a little fabric tab, and put the buttonhole in the tab and then hook it to your button. Or you could put the button on the tab and put your buttonhole on this. Now that would make it a little bit harder to get on and off, but it would work. You could probably also use Velcro. Maybe have a piece of elastic here, a Velcro end on it, and then Velcro on this piece. And so that you would pull your elastic over and attach it to the Velcro. I cannot stand Velcro near my hair. It gets caught every time, pulls my hair out. I don't like it. Also, repeated washing and drying, unless you're sewing the Velcro on, it's not going to hold up. So if you're going to use the glue type, it won't hold up at all. This is meant to be washed, dried, and ironed, or just washed and dried. Do not microwave these. Even without the metal, you don't want to microwave these. For one thing, you're never sure if you got 100% cotton unless you buy it brand new. So most of this stuff is from my stash. I'm pretty sure it's cotton because that's usually what I buy, but not guaranteed. The thread, however, is a polyester blend. Polyester will melt. The cotton will scorch if it's in the microwave for very long, and the polyester will melt. And then your elastic will disintegrate and your button could melt. So don't microwave these, please. Wash, dry, steam iron. That's the recommendation I have for this. If you're really worried, buy 2 of them, put one in a plastic bag and spray it down with Lysol really good after you launder it and let it sit for a couple days. All right, I hope that was helpful. Good luck making these. Bye.